was like, the stats about how often we're distracted are like terrifying. So
Yes,
that's
they are.
basically
They are
all I told
terrible.
them.
It is. Billy shared some of them with us.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I often tell people when we start this kind of thing, I say, "So, are you ready for me to ruin your day?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so
No,
it's
Bailey, I know
very,
you're in the midst of it, but I just think, oh my gosh, I can't imagine using this data and thinking about raising small children. Oh yeah. Right
yes,
now.
yes. Well, I have small children and I've been researching this since long before I had children. So, yeah, no, it was my kids were pretty screen free until the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit and they were 3 and 4, and Disney Plus was our sitter for like 3 months,
Yeah.
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 Yep.
I think that
Helping
sounds
them
pretty
through
common.
that transition was humbling, knowing what I
Yeah.
know about the neuroscience of childhood development.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
but now they're 7 and 9 and they're completely freaking nuts. No, just kidding. They're lovely humans.
We
And
know
Funny.
all
Yeah,
about
me
it.
too.
Liz and I have 7 children between us. So,
how many children do you have?
well,
Well,
between us, we have 7.
Wow. God bless you,
Yeah.
ladies. I think I'm a lot, like in New York, having 2 children is a lot. Like most people only have
Yeah.
one. So I'm like,
oh,
double
are you in New York? I didn't
trouble.
realize that. Yeah. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
But I just have two. So the first thing I want to say, like officially, is that I love it when people disagree with me. I love it when people interrupt me. Part of it is I'm Jewish,
Okay.
so I think it just makes me feel like I'm at home. But also I love to see the way human brains work,
Yeah.
and I just there you can't scare me off. So I really invite you to be as open and uncensored as humanly possible, because I really just want you to feel engaged, and I just, want this to feel like a conversation. Does that sound okay to you?
Yep. Perfect.
Yep.
Awesome.
Totally.
Rock and roll. Let's get started on ruining your day. Roll.
Yep.
We're so
Um,
excited to have our day ruined at 9.
I know, just
Usually it doesn't happen till about 4.
Yeah.
that's right. We're taking you to Hell Island very early in the day.
Yeah.
So basically you might have heard that folks are stressed out across America.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in how we are stressed out at work, because work stress, as something that's been measured, has seen this intense explosion over the last 10 to 15 years. And it's been measured. The APA stands for the American Psychological Association. It's been measured for 30, 40, 50 years. We've been interested in understanding how people feel in the workplace for a very long time. And all through the 2000s, meaning the OOs of our century, work stress hovered around the 40s, 42, 44, 47. By the teens, it starts creeping up to the 50s and 60s. By the 2020s, it's firmly in the 80s and 90s. And a lot of folks have said to me, well, I think it's very pandemic related, but even in 2019, a different group that focuses only on employee well-being said that 94% of American workers in a pretty large survey reported feeling stressed at work. So I don't actually think the pandemic is the biggest factor in all this stress.
I can tell you, I had a son who graduated from college close to that time and started a new job in New York. And he had a boss that would email him at 2 in the morning and expect responses.
Yeah, for sure. What industry was your son in?
Financial services.
Yeah, yeah, and people just accept it, it's just like a workaholic culture.
Well, when you're first out of college, you're scared not to answer, right?
Yeah.
I have never done that. I have never done that.
Never, me neither.
I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to let you know you're not alone. So,
Well, at least we have hands-free car now. We don't have to hold the phone.
Well, the thing about multitasking is that it's actually a human superpower, right? And it's not like a crazy, horrible thing to do, right? For those of us in the room who are moms, right? Being a mom is a giant list of multitasking items, right? Like making dinner while making sure homework is done, while trying to do a few dishes, while sweeping the floor, whatever, right? Like there's so much going on all the time. So, task switching a few hundred times a day, even a few thousand times a day, not actually a huge deal, a little exhausting at the peak of working motherhood, but for the most part, something we can live through, right? However, because of the way that these little pocket screens have begun to ruin our lives, we are now multitasking millions of times per day across all of society. And that has just brought our brains to this place where we're kind of all in collective hot water. So thinking about, just the biological phenomena of where our stress might be coming from, I'm inviting everybody in this little talk to consider that the task switching itself, because the thing about multitasking is it's not actually holding two tasks in your brain at exactly the same time. It's being able to hold the tasks and switch back and forth very rapidly. And that's what the actual functionality is in the brain. And when we do that, we burn our energy and our strength and our stamina faster. And again, we do it a few thousand times a day, we'll survive, right? That's womanhood, right? But because everyone is doing it millions of times per day, what we're seeing is a society-wide experience of burnout. And with that society-wide experience of burnout, stress is up, anxiety is up, heart attack rates are up for the first time in 30 years, stroke rates are up for the first time in 30 years, blood pressure is up, and depression is up. I'm going to take you on a little history lesson because it's not news anymore that this has happened, but most people don't understand just how we can track it. And as we track it, it kind of starts to all fit together. So SpaceX was a research and consulting firm focused on technology adoption and various productivity measurements from the early 80s until their principals retired in the mid 2000s. And they were actually on the front lines of helping workplaces adapt to email in the 1990s. And then in the early 2000s, they noticed a very strange phenomenon. Consistent email interruptions were stealing more time than they ever expected folks to lose from the adoption of email. In fact, I believe when they were first teaching everyone to use email in these very famous Fortune 500 companies that you've definitely heard of, right? The assumption was that email would make everyone more effective, more efficient, right? And they were measuring productivity hours literally every day. That was a normal thing for them as a research firm. But in 2005, they published a report showing that workers lost about 2 hours a day of productive time because distractions and interruptions were taking time away from their tasks, and that email was the sort of main reason that their brains were a little more distractible. And if you compare it to snail mail, right, think about what the workplace might have been like in 1989 or 1992. You got mail once or twice a day, right? The mailman comes in, you've got your little stack, you sort through it, and then you go back to work, right? So instead, folks are getting, dozens of emails a day, scores of emails, eventually hundreds of emails, but that's only the beginning, right? And if we think about the interruption timeline, we have the beginning of these sort of addictive websites like YouTube and Facebook, and then Apple launches the iPhone and Google launches the Android. And by 2015, with the smartphone in full dominance of our attention, a different efficiency and workflow expert estimated that the way that humans communicated in the office was so riddled with interruptions that interruptions had achieved a 6.2 hour per worker per day thievery of people's focus and ability to get work done. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Hours per day. Oh, and it gets worse.
Yeah.
I told you I was going to ruin your day.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So then I don't know, not every real estate team. I've worked with 700 companies across 80 industries, but I do have kind of a specialization in real estate. So I've worked with over 200 real estate agents and teams since 2010. So I'm very grateful to have, worked alongside so many folks in their cubicles and over Zoom. And, most of my work was New York based, of course, before Zoom. And then since Zoom, I've been very privileged to work with a lot of wonderful real estate teams. So I don't experience real estate teams as teams that use a lot of Slack or Microsoft Teams pings. But I think it's important to be aware that there is this society-wide influence that's happening across all of your clients, across all of the people you work with, your vendors, et cetera, that where Slack comes in and impacts enough people, Microsoft Teams comes in and impacts enough people, even TikTok comes in and impacts enough people, it starts to impact the entire culture of communication across our society, right? And that's why it's still relevant, even if you're not personally using Slack, right?
Right.
And you guys know how Slack works?
Yeah.
It's basically a perpetual.
It's
like direct messaging, right?
Yes, it's just little instant messaging stuff because of course no one responds to office emails anymore, even though I have met people, especially the Gen Zers in the world, who think that going to work is just reading and responding to emails all day. That's what they think a workplace is, right? So by 2018,
why would you go to the office if you think that's what your work environment should be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in 2018, by 2018, we have applications coming out that are trying to help people get their focus back, right? One of them is called Rescue Time. Rescue Time, maybe they shouldn't have done this. I don't know. I don't know that they were happy that this data came out, but they published research based on the 50,000 users that were signed up for their app in 2018, showing that the average American, this is a little misleading. It's not that the average American spends 72 minutes per day actually working. It's that according to their data, the average user of their app spent 72 minutes per day not having someone request their attention electronically. So just the data tracking, right, was that there were only 72 minutes per day on average that emails and pings and texts and social media alerts and everything else weren't being thrown at people. And that was 6 years ago. So I think it's worse now. And anecdotally,
now you've got news alerts and appointment alerts and texts and
exactly. So anecdotally, I hear from people just like you and you, they think it's worse now, and I agree with them. So, and then Slack and Teams gets, more widespread. So the other piece here is that when we think about the neuroscience of all this, because I've been teaching neuroscience of team collaboration, neuroscience of sales. Neuroscience of sales is kind of my most popular module, but also neuroscience of productivity and focus for many years now. And one of the things that I love about neuroscience is that it gives us the ability to really dig into the biological phenomena of our experiences, right? Because every thought, every emotion, every impulse, every physical action that your body takes has a physical representation across your brain and your nervous system, right? There's hormones that are driving things. There's electrical impulses that are being exchanged. And we know more and more every day about what those electrical impulses and those hormones are up to. And one area
Nora, it's really interesting. Sorry to interrupt, but just really quickly.
I love interruptions. We talked about this, please.
Well, when Bailey sent us this information, I don't know, Bailey, I can't remember if it was a week ago or 4 weeks ago. I don't remember the timing.
After the retreat, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was just out of town at a wedding and I thought about this and I was like, okay, I'm not going to carry my phone around because I walk around my house. I'm like this. It's part of I can't even get it out of my hand.
Yeah.
And anyway, yeah, exactly. It's like stuck. Can't get it off. So I have started like putting my phone in a drawer. So at this wedding, and my husband has the same problem I do. So 2 things I noticed. One was I physically had a sensation, check my phone. Like, because I didn't have it, I was aware that something happened.
Yeah.
Constantly, this says check your phone.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing. The second thing I noticed is like sitting at a table with my husband who has his phone and I don't. Super annoying. I'm like,
you didn't
FOMO.
Love.
Total FOMO.
Who's been on the other side of that.
Yeah.
When business is really busy.
Yeah.
He's like, hello, why did you come to dinner?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, but to feel that there was this physical thing that I was like, check your phone. But if you don't have it, you notice that you went like, it's weird.
I have a question too, and something that popped in my brain on this is I haven't read, and I'm sure you have read studies. So is it increasing cortisol, and is it part of our weight gain and part of our
100%.
stress?
Absolutely.
Asking
We
for
will
a
get to
friend.
that. Oh my God. You guys. Oh my God.
Friend.
Both of you are so educated.
Yeah,
I'm very impressed. No,
I
I
hadn't thought about this being part of a cortisol response
our
and
problem.
weight gain.
We have to get rid of our phones.
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No,
I'll do anything to lose 5 to 10 pounds. Tell me to get rid of my phone.
I know,
Sweet.
I know. All you have to do is put your phone down for like 20 minutes a day and you'll be like, you'll be on super mom.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely connected to the different hormonal issues that we're all struggling with. And as women, we are very blessed that at this point in our history, I think it's a much more open conversation to talk about hormones in general, because as women, hormones are hugely influential across our lives in different ways at different times. I know I look extremely young, but I'm actually menopausal. Like I'm not perimenopausal. I'm like full on, like 2 years in, like there's no more babies made in my oven, and I'm okay with that. All right, God's in charge. And also, like my mom hit menopause at exactly the same time, so I knew to expect it. That menopause would come at 42, and sure enough, my younger sister is getting the same information, and that's just what it is. Like that's how it works in our family. So being informed about how hormones work, both in sort of the natural like life cycle way, as well as the way that, you know, these artificial experiences are creating enormous influence, is really important for our health, right? And there's a lot of influence, I think, over male hormones as well, but I think men don't feel as safe talking about that vulnerability. So I do have a mission to like,
In general.
yeah. No, I mean, this is another discussion for a different talk, but I actually think that the quote unquote old fashioned notions of male and female roles are actually more harmful to boys and men than they are to girls and women, even though I believe that they're very harmful to girls and women too. And I have a lot of data for that. Again, a different talk on a different day. But we want, you know, one of the things you'll see today is we'll talk a bit about kind of understanding what we can learn from ancient human experiences, and how we can, you know, put some of the things that we've lost back into our current lives today in positive ways. So so yay, we'll talk more about human stuff very soon. Okay, all of this is human stuff. Let's talk about addiction, because the neuroscience of addiction is something that's actually been studied really closely. And one of the things that happens with like addictive patterns is that one of the only ways the body gets away with as much addictive behavior as it can get away with is that there's a lot of denial, right? And it's part of the cortisol and the dopamine and the adrenaline to kind of like literally like click off some of our awareness around frequency of addictive behavior. So I'm saying all that as a preface for the fact that 47% of Americans can, you know, do admit that they are addicted to their phones, meaning their natural state of denial is switched off because it has become so bad. So I think the actual numbers are much higher, but to have half of all Americans not be able to lie about it anymore, even though our brains are programmed to lie about it, is amazing to me. Not in a good way, just sort of in a wow way, you know. In 2013, I've been assimilating and, you know, and finding this research for a very, very long time. In 2013, Americans checked their phones 150 times per day. We thought that was a lot back then. 10 years later in 2023, according to data from Asurion, which is that insurance company that like you pay the $5 extra per month from your Verizon phone plan. So they have millions and millions of users that they can pull this data from. The average American checks their phones 352 times per day.
Wow.
Right. And Julie, I love that you were so cognizant of that physical impulse, because it really is a physical process in your body that's driving it. We really have in so many ways lost the power of choice. without, you know, a lot of intervention. You know, humans are amazing, like how much we can interact with the software inside our bodies, right? But we do need a fair amount of back and forth with the outside world in order to get to a place where we have choices again after they've been stolen from us, you know? Since the pandemic, we do see an increase in children's screen time in a huge way that is very pandemic related. Since the pandemic, we've seen that most children now spend 4 hours or more per day on screens. Yeah, I know it's terrifying. And we're getting to a place where cell phones have caused over 20% of accidents, car accidents for the last few years. Used to be drinking and driving, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know. I've noticed too, more often going out to dinner, young families now, they'll have multiple kids at the table and they all have screens and the kids are trying to eat and watch a screen and the parents are on their phone. I'm like, what in the world is happening? Like,
What's the point of being out to dinner?
right.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
was-
No, there's
I literally wanted to go like, hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to be said about the importance of just human interaction during childhood and how much we have to kind of explain that to everyone now.
Yeah.
There's so many pieces that I hear from educators and other quote unquote experts where it's almost like they expect people to have the same views on childhood that they did when they were raising their kids 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I'm just like, no, you actually can't assume any of that is obvious to parents in modern life anymore. And so we have to like really slow down and get almost remedial in how we explain what children need, you know? But also I'll talk about like why it's so hard to even understand what children need, given there's bigger pieces behind all this. You'll hear, we'll get to it, I promise. Okay. So here's some really painful and scary mental health statistics, basically confirming that depression and anxiety are on the rise, especially for folks, the younger they get. And the younger they get, of course, the earlier they've been handed an iPad to get them to shut up, right? And now 73% of Gen Z uses TikTok. So, you know, the multitasking thing that we talked about, the task switching, people do it millions and millions of times when they're on TikTok, when they're on screens for hours and hours a day. And then we wonder why everybody's depressed. How strange. Now I'm going to take it over to the workplace because I think it is important to understand how this all shows up in workplace behavior. And people pay me money to help them with their workplaces, you know, because they like the ROI, right? They're like, wow, we doubled our sales and shortened our workday. That's amazing, right? So it's good to have that ROI as a carrot, right? So Gloria Mark is one of my favorite researchers in this area. And she starts her research in 2004. She's a professor of informatics at UC Irvine in California. And in 2004, you know, she and her graduate students, you know, hooked up all these video cameras and all these workplaces owned by these big Fortune 500 companies, you know, companies like Cisco and Microsoft, right? And they watched hours of video of people in their offices, and they began to sort of quantify and give names to workplace behavior. And one of the names they invented was this idea of the work sphere, right? Because in the modern workplace, you don't actually just do your work at a typewriter and nothing else. You have a computer, you have a phone, you might even have a landline, you have other devices, you have other pieces of paper and notebooks and business cards. So if you're doing one task, you might be using multiple devices, but still focused inside that task. And so they didn't want to mistake interruptions inside. They didn't want to mistake tool switching for task switching. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So they invented this notion of the work sphere to identify when tasks were happening and when tasks got interrupted. And they found that the average amount of time in 2004 that folks worked in their work sphere on a task was about 10 minutes. That
It's true.
remember that? Remember 20 years ago? When you could work for 10 whole minutes? And I know it's like it's a little comedy and tragedy, isn't it?
I know.
So and the percent of interruptions caused by external folks was about 56%. The percent of interruptions caused by just like sort of impulse, right? Which you identified so bravely, Julie, right? Like that, oh, that physical thing, right? And usually that physical thing, if you have the phone, goes with a thought, right? So the thought might be like, oh, I forgot to call the plumber, right? Or something like that, right? And the interruption recovery time in 2004, once people were interrupted, whether it was self-interruption or external interruption, was about 23 minutes.
Really?
That was
23 whole minutes?
What'd you say, Liz?
23 whole minutes to recover?
Yeah, and that only gets worse.
Oh.
Yeah, it sucks. I'm sorry. I told you I was going to ruin your day. Here we are. So then we fast forward. Bailey's like, this is what I warned you about.
I know.
You think Nora's friendly. She's really a crocodile.
I love it because I loved thinking, and like when I met you, I was like, I feel like I do really well with completing my tasks and trying to stay focused, but I do have a 2-year-old running around. So I'm like, anything I can learn, strategies, anything to help de-stress. And then if I can bring any kind of knowledge to be like, hey, let's hone in our communication. So, Liz and Julie could be off by 3 p.m. or like, you know what I mean? And try and tighten up even boundaries with clients or whatever we can do to bring that stress down.
I'll be honest, I don't know how to have boundaries, especially in the real estate industry with clients, because they have access to us and I feel like they pay us a lot of money. And so we should be at their beck and call all the time, anytime.
Well, that is something that I hear from a lot of agents, and something that you'll see in later slides is that it's never my desire for your clients to feel like they are respecting your boundaries.
Oh.
It's always my desire for your clients to have the emotion of, wow, Liz is always so responsive. I feel so loved and cared for.
Interesting.
So
okay, well, you must be a magician doing something I don't know.
I know.
I may be a magician. But or a neuroscientist or a little of both.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times when people hear this data, they kind of assume they have to do a lot of announcing to the world that that they will no longer be available because
talk to Nora Simpson and she said I need more boundaries.
That's right. That's right. Fill in the blankety blank about how you're all ruining my ability to be fill in the blankety blank, right? And that's actually not, I mean, you'll see. I mean, you guys are so smart. I end up saying all the things that come later in the presentation, but a lot of the conversation from most of the people who've written a lot of books about this, a lot of the conversation is about kind of hating people and getting away from interruptions and seeing people as like the problem and seeing interruption and interruption behavior as like the problem. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work because we're business people. And in business, we have to make our clients feel amazing. And we have to make sure that we're always making our clients feel amazing. And we have to make sure that we're always making our colleagues and collaborators feel valued, because as soon as that goes away, we're making zero money. So no thanks. Like that's not like I just think
then we hate people and we're bitter.
What'd you say, Liz?
But then we hate people and we're bitter.
Right. And broke. Like, come on. So very bad advice. And I think that I don't think it's an accident that a lot of that advice comes from people who are working in academia. So they just don't even know what it's like.
Such a good point.
Yeah.
I steal liberally from their research, obviously, but most of the tools I teach are tools I invented. Sitting in cubicles, sitting in conference rooms, sitting on Zoom calls with people, because I'm a field girl. I'm not a lab girl. I want to be out in the field working with people, making things work better and better and better. And so many of my clients have helped me innovate along the way, because my official position is, if you don't like it, great, tell me more. And we figure out what needs to happen, and then we invent it and like customize it. And that's part of the process at this point, right? So, so because of that, I now have like, stacks and stacks of tools that I can teach other people, you know.
Yeah.
But nobody in academia is, you know, they didn't get into academia because they love being out in the world with lots of people, being really
Yeah.
weird, you know. They generally don't like people at all. That's why they like being alone, reading and writing. So in any event, let's talk about 10 years later with Gloria Mark, and then I promise we're going to actually see some slides about all these things I keep sharing with you. So 10 years later, it's 2014, and Gloria Mark publishes research that shows that the previous 10-minute work sphere has now shrunk to 7.8 minutes before a colleague interruption and 8.6 minutes before a self-interruption. The average time it takes to get back to a task is between 32 and 34 minutes. So that's an increase of 50% from the 23-minute number in 2004. And the chance of not resuming your task that day at all is 30%.
Goodness.
And a big part of that is that because once there's one interruption, there's another. It's not that you can't recover from that one interruption. It's that they keep continuing to happen once the one happens.
Once you're
Yeah, like
domino.
you have to get up to go get a drink of water, and then you see someone, and then you whatever. Yeah.
Our brains have really fallen into this incredibly intense distractibility mode.
Okay.
And
that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's a mode that has become so just uniform that it's very rare to even find people who know how not to be in that mode.
Yeah.
And our clients and our vendors and our colleagues that aren't part of whatever transformational work we're seeking to do, so that we can reclaim the other modes that are available to us in our brain, like for reals, they also still exist. Our clients are still suffering. So we don't want to like make them feel bad that they're still suffering. We just want to be able to connect with them. And I actually love when I'm teaching the neuroscience of sales in connection with the neuroscience of productivity. I love to teach, high customer service, high customer service industry folks, like real estate folks. I love to teach them, like, if you can show these people grace about how overwhelmed and distracted they are literally all the time, right? If you can be the one person that says, hey, I know you're probably like dealing with a million things. Could I get on the phone with you and just show you the DocuSign? Like where to sign on the DocuSign, right? Because there are very particular shortcuts to focus, and there are very particular shortcuts to getting people to do tasks. And most people don't even know what they are.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But I know what they are. And those clients are like, oh my God, Julie gets me. Right? Like,
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that most like service industry people don't realize is that every single person I've ever spoken to about this, and you can tell I do a lot of speaking. I have a couple books out. I have 7 video courses. Like I'm out and about, right?
Yeah.
Every single person I've ever spoken to has a secret belief that they are losing more threads than other people around them, right? Because we all have this kind of like, basically the epidemic is affecting everyone, but it's almost like this weird closed secret. And we secretly believe that other people are more on top of their game than we are. And in fact, all of us feel so behind the game. And it's remarkable to me how many people have no clue how normal they are for feeling that way. So one of the pieces of good news I hope that my talk around these issues shares is like, you're normal, you're not bad. And if you become the person who has the tools to have grace and compassion for the others who haven't reached Paradise Island where you actually have access to focus again, right? You can still be that person who helps them move along in a way that almost no one else can.
Oh, interesting.
So it's a different value add other than just being always available or always knowledgeable. It's a different value add. You literally become the person who helps them connect with capacity to do hard things.
Interesting.
These days, everything feels harder than it used to feel.
So true.
Yeah, because of all this craziness, because of everything I'm showing you. So this is terribly depressing. And then Gloria Mark, after 2014, goes into other interesting monitorings of attention. And by then we have all this all this software that she can install on computers in Cisco and Microsoft and some of these other big fancy companies. And so once the software is installed, she can actually track that the average time that people are able to focus on one task in one application or screen is about 2.5 minutes in 2004. And that number goes down to a conservative estimate of 47 seconds by 20.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
And Julie, think about that biological feeling you had when like this hand was empty and you kept kind of going like this, right? That's every person.
Yeah.
Right. So you're reading New York Times Online, or you're reading The Real Deal, or you're reading, you're doing comps, and like something in you is like, a very pretty sound. I like to make it for my children. The other piece here is that it's not just about interruptions that take us away from our task. It's also about interruptions that diminish our ability to do tasks efficiently. So, Eric Altman is actually a psychology professor who studies attention over at Michigan State. And he was very interested in very, very tiny distractions that don't pull people fully out of their task. So he took a group of 300 college students and gave them a simple task to do. It had to do with the word unravel, which starts with a U, right? And alphabetizing the letters of that word, right? You've got a U in that word, you've got an A, right? And so it's a short task. It's like a 2 to 3 minute task. And then he divides the group into 3 groups, and each group has 100 participants. Group 1 had 0 distractions to do this simple, alphabetizing of the letters of this word. Group 2 had one 2.8 second distraction. Group 3 had one 4.4 second distraction. Now, Altman and his team theorized that that human brains can't even notice a distraction in a way, a distraction as small as 2.8 seconds in a way that would actually affect error rates. So their hypothesis was that the group 1 and group 2 error rates would be the same, more or less, right? Like you're typing on your email, someone calls you, someone you don't need to be talking to right now, right? Maybe even like, a sales call, right? Monster Reservation Group want to, book your next vacation, right? And you're like, nope, back to the email, right? 2.8 seconds. I've done the math. Like I've actually like set a timer and seen how long it takes to reject a call. 2.8 seconds, about that.
That's all you get that you're not even going to take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that their hypothesis was wrong. One 2.8 second distraction actually doubled error rate.
Oh my gosh.
I know. That's how I feel.
Yikes.
And one 4.4 second distraction tripled error rates. Bailey's like, I told you.
I know. It's so interesting to me.
Yeah. So basically, like, even when you're working really hard to finish something, because there's so much distraction coming at you, you're doing it more slowly. You're having to go back and fix more stuff. And so you're getting less done. Make sense?
Yeah.
You just can't even remember where you were at.
No.
Right. Well, that's usually a whole workspace, right?
Yeah.
But even, just typing an email and going, oh, I forgot the word agent. Like, no, I have to go back. Our agents and da da da. Plus, the obvious solutions don't work. So in a 2022 study, the media and communications professors at Penn State University, Mengshi Lau and Sham Sundar, actually asked a bunch of smartphone users to put their smartphones on silent or do not disturb. And then they had a control group that just had their phones either on, there's 2 control groups, either on vibrate or on ring loud. And the folks who had their phones on silent or do not disturb actually checked their phones more than the folks who just had the alerts on.
Wow. Because I feel like they're missing something.
Yeah.
Like,
You're paranoid.
That's right. So we've studied all this, and you guys are so gosh darn smart. You already knew to talk about this, but here it is, right? Stress is so much more than a feeling, right? It's these floods of hormones, it's electrical impulses. And every time we pick up our phones, believe it or not, the reason we pick up our phones is that they trigger this really important hormone in our bodies called dopamine. And just to give you like a little bit lay of the land of hormones, the three most important positive hormones, and really what we're looking for is balance in the human body, right? Because like a little bit of cortisol, a little bit of adrenaline, a little bit of norepinephrine is okay, right? But we want that nice balance with our serotonin, which is our well-being hormone, and we want that nice balance with our oxytocin, which is our cuddly hormone, right? Like the mommy baby stuff, since we have 7 kids over here between the two of us, right? And dopamine is more like the pleasure, like the intense pleasure hormone, right? And one of the ways to understand what's happening right now is that we're having this extreme response where there's a high, like much higher than normal levels of dopamine and much higher than normal levels of cortisol and adrenaline. And so we're all just out of balance and out of whack. And I want to talk about like what the functionality is of why that happens and why our phones are so good at making it happen.
Okay.
So every time we pick up our phones, our brains prepare for that hit of dopamine. And dopamine arrives sometimes, but never always. And that intermittent reinforcement of dopamine drives this thing called the dopamine feedback loop, which is a very well-known concept in neuroscience. Now, the dopamine feedback loop is the same process that drives heroin cravings for heroin addicts. And I put that in there because it's very dramatic.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
in point of fact, it drives every addiction. January, by the grace of God, will be 19 years in Overeaters Anonymous for me.
Oh, wow. Good job.
Amazing.
One day at a time. God's in charge. Grateful to be alive. But the dopamine feedback loop also drives, cravings for foods that will kill me. It also drives alcohol. It also drives cravings for alcohol, for gambling, etc. Right? So it's really all addiction. It's just that it's very dramatic to say heroin.
Yeah, to say heroin.
Yeah.
Right? Doesn't it just erect you in your seat, right?
Right.
Exactly.
So the other piece about the dopamine feedback loop is that it is part of why you feel those urges, those physical urges. And when we resist those urges, our brains produce a brief explosion of stress hormones. So here we are, Liz. This is what you predicted. Here it is. Cortisol, adrenaline, vasopressin, norepinephrine. These are the 4 most important stress hormones. And here they are. Look at all this horrible stuff it does to your body. So
I got all those.
Yeah. Our health is not so good these days here in America,
Oh my goodness.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Stop, it's stressful.
I know. You gotta quit.
That was not the point of this.
But it does, no, we're joking.
We're joking.
But it does make sense why, like when things get super busy in a stressful environment and that we are so tied to our phones and it's hard to take a break, that it feels like a burnout when it's been going on for months. When things are super busy, it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I could do much more, because you feel like you can't do much more. And all these things are happening.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and when I coach people on this, what we do is we do a whole, like, you probably may have heard about like these dopamine detox vacation systems where you literally leave your phone behind for a week and go to a beach or a forest. That's great for your health if you can do that, but most people can't, especially if you have children, right? Or adult children who like to talk to you,
Right.
And so helping people do a dopamine detox, that's actually what I call a process addiction detox instead of a full-on detox, right? Because when we treat dopamine and phones the way people treat alcohol or heroin, that's one thing, and that's what leads to the Great Resignation. When we treat it the way people in Overeaters Anonymous have to treat food, then we have a different opportunity to build a healthier relationship with our bodies and our workplaces and our clients without completely shutting down our whole lives.
Abstinence. Yeah. Yeah.
And we get access. Like, I still eat food. Can you believe it? I have actually eaten food every day since I got into Overeaters Anonymous. I know it's a sub
That would be a difficult addiction. I can't even imagine.
It's not easy, but I'm okay today, thank God, right? But like, so the fact that I can be physically healthy and, you know, I'll be honest, the first few weeks were very difficult, you know, and there's ups and downs and other stuff that goes into all that. But my point is like the fact that I ate food every day since the first day that I came into Overeaters Anonymous and still have access to a lot of health, that's part of what I teach with, that's part of what I was seeking when I was trying to figure out how do I help people with this. Right. So then when people do try to quit or people do try to change their behavior without like really carefully structured tools, the stress hormones even just get even worse. And these explosions, the reason that it's so hard to quit is that long before you get to the other places where your health is being compromised just by the experience of this loop of nasty hormones, the moment of I'm going to try to change my behavior is almost always met with these 4 mental experiences right away.
Oh.
So that's how the cortisol and the dopamine stay in charge.
Wow.
And that's why you need someone to hold your hand. Like, that's why I can give this talk for free, because I want people to have the actual results. And I know that they probably aren't going to find help to get through all this without somebody, you know, named Nora. It's going to help them.
When you say, like, I'm looking at this, and when you say negative thinking, is it like a filter that goes on that sees everything in a negative light?
It's different for different people. Here are the 4.
Oh,
funny you should ask. Here are the 4. Here are the 4 most common ways that I see people shut down.
Okay.
Around these issues. And I don't really have a problem. That tends to be men.
I was literally going to say, that's my husband.
Right?
I don't on that much.
Yeah, that tends to be men.
I'd like have a secret video.
Right. I mean, also, like, you'll have this recording. So if you want to share, you know, if you want to show him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes. I actually sent out a recording that I had made of a workshop very similar to this one for a different team to a whole bunch of different people who had just, you know, either they saw me talk a year ago or they, you know, they wanted to book me for their corporate team, whatever. And one of the gentlemen wrote back to me and said that he and his wife and children had watched it over dinner. And I was like, that is actually great. I'm really glad that you're sharing. This needs to get out into the real world.
We don't have a problem. We watched the video during dinner and
just screen time.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so I do find that it's men over the age of 50 usually. Like there is a generational experience here. And also when I see male managers are usually number 2.
Oh, interesting.
Especially if they're over 50.
So interesting.
Number 3 is my young folks who just literally, like, for them, this is like an organ that's part of their body. Like they don't have memories of not having it. So they nod along and then they're just like,
yeah.
And then number 4 is my working moms.
Oh, yes.
And just so you know, we can set settings so that like there's certain calls that always have the ability to like cut through certain kinds of do not disturb things. And, you know, I had this team I worked with years ago on this issue where we had like a little time plan that the team shared, and I'll explain more about what that even means in a bit. And, you know, I was checking in with each team member, you know, one-on-one, as well as working with them in the group. And, you know, each one was sort of giving me their personal experience of the progress and how it was going for them and what they were learning from my my tribal neuroscience methodology that I teach along with it, just so that people feel like they're really getting it, right, with their brains and stuff. And so I was having all these really nice conversations. And then this one lady, I finally got her on the phone because she had been a little bit harder to schedule with. And she said, yeah, I didn't do it. I haven't done it at all.
She's honest.
Said, thank you so much for telling me. I love when you're honest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you help me understand what's going on? And she was not, when I was like, thank you for telling me, she was like, yeah, whatever. Right. And so she remained very annoyed. And she was like, my teenage daughter has been suicidal and self-harming, and I will never miss a call from her or anyone else related to her, meaning like therapist, counselor, teacher, husband, right? And I was like, 100% in agreement with you.
Yeah, that's scary.
Sounds terrifying. Let's make a list of all the people who need to be able to reach you 24/7, day or night. Let's make that list right now. School number, psychiatrist number, counselor number. We made that list. We set her settings so that all 8 of those phone numbers could get into her phone no matter what was happening.
Oh.
And then she was like, oh, maybe I could.
Maybe I could do this a little bit.
Maybe it would be okay, right? And I was like, okay, great. Her whole resistance had been, what if I miss one of these calls? Once we could reassure her that she wasn't going to miss any of these calls. Guess how many times across the next 5 years she received, this was a while back. Guess how many times over the next 5 years she actually received that emergency call?
0. Oh my gosh. So she had geared her entire program around.
I get that.
Something. Totally get it. Yeah.
I'm a mom. I get it too.
I was going to say, as moms, we go immediately to worst case scenario, and we set our whole lives up for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So
if we miss that one
we
call,
miss the one,
we're screwed.
Yeah.
Forever, right? And you'll never forgive yourself,
Right.
So I get it. I wasn't mad at her. I was like, I completely get it. Let's do this together, But I don't, God bless you, Bailey. But I also don't think it's, I think it's a really interesting data point.
Yeah.
Right. Just to help us all keep all this in perspective. And, we have these responsibilities and we have to put them first. No question. And I think that our fear and our anxiety are so strong. And remember, our fear and our anxiety will show up in these places, right? So we don't ever want to miss that one call. That being said, the likelihood that it will actually happen, we need to put safety valves in place, no question.
Right.
But also, probably the world is actually a safer place than we think.
Interesting. So true.
So here's more. We've already kind of touched on this. Here's more about those experts who can't help. And here are all the books, at least these are some of the books I own. I own stacks and stacks of books that have been written about this. And I've, read and paged through all of them. And I can tell you that they're giving advice to imaginary readers who work alone most of the time.
Interesting.
And that's just not business. We work with colleagues, clients, vendors. We all have to work with other people all the time. So even like this productivity ninja guy, the one with the neon green book, he all of his tips and tricks revolve around how to be a productivity ninja. So he'll be like, be stealthy like a ninja, be in good physical shape like a ninja. And then he's like, hide like a ninja. And what is hide like a ninja? It's literally hide from everyone you work with and everyone you're accountable to. And I'm like, no, you'll get fired.
Right. And you'll be miserable.
Yeah. And you'll lose all your clients. Like, what? No, that makes no sense.
We're going to hide now from our clients.
Right? No, don't hide. No, please don't hide from your clients. So, and I think that in business, the thing that, I think people read these books and they come into work on a Monday morning and go, I'm gonna do this. It's January 8th. I'm gonna go for it with my New Year's resolution. And then the thing that sabotages them is that team members and active clients need things. And, it's like nothing ever happened within 3 days, right? Because the influences are so strong in our body. And not to, belabor the point, but I think what happens to so many folks in business ownership and in the corporate world, it's like that manager level, right? So once we're running successful businesses or we get promoted to lead successful teams, the great reward is that now we have this double work day because we spend all day responding to interruptions and questions. And then we have to find time on nights and weekends to do things that, we said we would do, like with our fingers on keyboards,
So true.
And people are exhausted. So I have kind of a bone to pick with these advice givers who talk about the self and how, all of this is manageable by, being stronger and smarter.
Right.
And I really believe that unless you have a whole team protecting your focus time, and I've seen this in C-level offices where there's like one person who gets to have focus time and everybody else is getting burnt out every day protecting that one person so that they can have quiet time. And then they just have a lot of turnover and they have to retrain and retrain and retrain, right? But I think that the most powerful unit for transforming productivity is a team. And it can be a small team. It can be a 3-person team. It doesn't have to be small.
We're tiny but mighty.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love tiny but mighty. So, and here's what I was saying earlier, right, Liz? That we can teach a team how to interact with each other and outsiders so that all internal questions get answered promptly. All outsiders feel served and cared for, right? And that's, in your case, that's clients and vendors, but it's also Bailey's daughter, right? Like, and I have done this many times with folks where we're able to create blocks of pure uninterrupted focus time every single day. And for the record, focus time doesn't have to be time when you're doing something that's very quiet. It can be time when you're on the phone, right? It can be time when you're like working through a solution to something with other people. That's fine. The idea is it's not time when you're distracted by 6 other things. You're just focusing on one thing and you're able to be present and like your brain is working in one direction and it's better for your health, basically. Better for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I teach teams is I do what have you got, Liz? I saw that.
We have a space heater in here and all of a sudden I'm so hot because it was blowing.
I've been dying of heat in here.
Oh no.
And because normally we freeze in our office, but it's been getting hotter and hotter and hotter. But it's over on the floor. And so I was like, well, I don't want to like
I'm distracted for sure. Okay.
Your physical comfort is really important. I'm so we took a moment.
Turtleneck.
Yeah. Well, and also Idaho, you guys have to be so ready for cold, right?
Yes. Exactly. Anyway.
You've made me hot. I'm taking off my sweater.
We've been freezing in our office and finally bought a space heater, so we don't really know how it works.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no time like the present to learn. That's great.
Yeah.
So generally, like just to give you like a preview of what it looks like, I do ask teams to take on a team time structure. And we find that basically we have like a little morning priorities huddle, which is our most formal structure of the day, followed by our most chaotic moment of the day, which is what I call the scheduling scramble, kind of like controlled chaos.
Yeah.
Then we just have focus flow state blocks, and you can literally be doing anything in those focus flow state blocks. You can be talking to each other. You can be talking to a client. You can be dealing with X and Y. The hope is that it's pre-scheduled, but also, even if it's not pre-scheduled, it's pre-awareness. It's pre-awared. Does that make any sense? I don't even know what the real word is.
Mm-hmm.
so that you're like, I don't know when this lender is going to call, but because this is a hot and heavy moment and these clients almost walked away and now we think we're closing at 9 a.m. tomorrow, this lender is going to get to call me anytime and I'm going to be doing that. And at least everybody knows that that's a pre-awareness.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And that's part of how we look at the day and plan for the day and just add sanity back into the day. So even interruptions and impossible to predict predictions get kind of massaged in. Because what I find is most of the internal thoughts that people have about like needing to check their phones is this belief that immediacy is the fastest way to make sure something happens. Because people are so used to forgetting and losing threads that they think if they don't deal with it right now, they'll never deal with it.
Right.
So part of having a team time structure is that we bring predictability back into the experience of the team. And so we have like these little scheduled, predictable pieces that, again, each day are very flexible, but we're tracking them and we're making sure that predictability is there. And once predictability comes back, immediacy doesn't have to be the only way we solve problems. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't explain all of this in our talk because it would take me weeks. And that's why, I get people started on their team time structure almost right away, right? But it takes time to really learn how to live inside it in a way that's never repressive and that's always liberating. But it's kind of cool. And we do have these like visual trackers that are part of it. And it really just like life becomes so much more predictable. And there are pieces that are worked in and, there's an element of customization to every individual team, but there are pieces that are worked in where people go, oh, I know I'll be able to get Bailey to ask her this question at 2:00. So I'll just text her now and be like, don't respond. Let's just make sure we deal with this at 2:00. And whether she looks at it now or she looks at it at 1:59, I don't care. I know that I'm going to call her at 2 because she said that she's going to be available for calm time at 2:00. That's what the scheduled communication time looks like. We have like these little moments each day. And some people go, I'm not available for any calm times today. It's going to be a crazy day. We say, okay, see you at the huddle tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And with the huddles,
But that's the exception and not the rule for every single day.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We have these structures, we lean on them. And because we can lean on them, they don't have to be perfect. Right? I'm working with a team right now where I show up to their huddle every day at 10:00 Eastern time, right? And on Monday morning, basically the Julie and the Liz of the team both had to be somewhere else. And they have a larger team than you guys do. But like it was like, well, I don't know what happened on that Monday huddle. I'm not even sure who was there. But Tuesday, everybody was back, right?
Okay.
So the magic is it's not about perfection. It's about structure. It's about leaning on structures and knowing that you can deviate as much as you need to from the structure, but you always come back to it. And that's the way that we discover how to have sanity in this larger, crazy society that isn't going to change because we want it to change.
Right.
Unfortunately. These things that 10 years ago, this was like, let's invent this. Like I literally did not know how to solve this for people, but I was like, well, I have some knowledge about how humans do well when so yeah, okay, let's try this, right? So if I'm giving this talk to a corporation, I say, pick one team, right? And let's just do this for one team, right? And then people get curious and excited about how come they're happy now, right?
Yeah.
For the internal teams, basically the other thing to remember is anytime we have addictive behavior, which our phones have become, we also unwittingly pick up those addictive moments when we're uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, I think that's very true.
And we miss out on the skill development that's waiting for us if we were to have a good enough balance of guidance and support to make it through that uncomfortable moment and learn something on the other side of it, because the discomfort fits so perfectly into the dopamine feedback loop that it just becomes something we sort of avoid.
Yeah.
So when we stop avoiding, because we've got Nora's tools and tips and tricks, we actually get to create new skill development across the team, which I love, because then I can teach my neuroscience of sales and people get to like acquire whole new skill sets. And especially my favorite people to teach this to, I'll be honest, is very seasoned, very knowledgeable, very accomplished people, because sometimes they run out of cool new things to learn because they've learned so much and they're so curious, And I'm like, oh my God, I have like a neuroscience-based way of understanding all human behavior, and I think you're gonna love it. So this is how it looks for sales teams. And it's all about like just understanding the neuroscience and then being able to put tools to work for you that make you more effective, which also helps with the whole like doubling results while shortening workdays.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I have to look. I think I've got a little bit of flexibility in my schedule. So if you guys wanted to look at, oh, this is like all my fancy people who made lots of money.
I love it.
Look at that. It's not so bad, right?
Kristen Francis.
You know Kristen. So many people know Kristen. The last group to see this photo, they were like, she doesn't have blonde hair. But when I worked with her, she did. It was a while ago.
She looks familiar to me. But
she's a KW agent. Her team, when I worked with her, I took her team from closing 8 deals a month to 16 deals a month.
whoa.
And when they were closing 8 deals a month, Bailey's like, I love these numbers. When they were closing 8 deals a month, they were working till midnight every night. And when I got them to closing 16 deals a month, they were done with work most days by 3 o'clock.
Shut up.
I know. It seems wild. It seems wild.
I'm very proud because it's not
Sign
just
me up.
it's not just that I worked with Kristen Francis and that's what happened for her. It's that she took I believe in fostering independence. Like I love seeing people take all this knowledge and just keep running, right? I want to work with my teams for as long as they'll have me, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks. Great. Love it. Just so you know, I charge by the week. You're never like, you can fire me anytime. Like I want you to feel like you have complete control over the process, because part of my job is to make sure your nervous system feels safe. So if you feel like you're on the hook all the time like that, I think that diminishes safety too much. So
Right. That's wise.
plus I like to earn my keep, But in any event, Kristen, I stay in touch with her. We talk a couple times a year. Her team is so effective and so productive these days. They sell about $60 million worth of real estate every year.
Wow.
And she does almost nothing. She just coaches and teaches across the country and has an extraordinary amount of free time and loves it.
Crazy.
So,
Okay, I want that.
yeah, right?
Totally.
And so
I would like to be
Got a
done.
full-blown
I like
spaz
what
out.
I heard you say that made me super excited about it is I heard you say you're way more productive, you're doing more deals, and you have a lot more time. That just doesn't seem possible.
right. Well, it does sound like it does start to sound like I've got some kind of magic or witchcraft, like dangerous witchcraft.
But it's like it's unlocking our productivity and our efficiency. Yeah.
Interesting. So how does
Yeah.
it work, Nora? Tell us how it works. Hold on, because sorry, distraction. There's my phone.
No
But I
worries.
really need to see if we're supposed to be somewhere.
No worries. You've got to do that.
I know. My next class is in 15 minutes.
Okay, we
Oh,
will.
good.
Oh yeah, we've got, what do we have? 15 minutes. We have that hour.
With Miss Jerica. You met Jerica at the retreat.
Awesome. Derek is great.
Yeah.
So basically, I have all these theories about how the brain works, and I have lots of citations for backing them up. And when I help people understand, like, this is how human brains work, and we have these contagious emotions, and we've kind of been taught a lot of messages that don't make sense if you're actually dealing with a real human body, you know? So just helping them understand, like, hopefully an emotionally and intellectually accessible way to look at our bodies and to look at our brains and go, okay, so we've got this whole set of needs. Let's think about how we get these needs met, right? And also, how do we perceive the world depending on what the tribal needs are driving inside us? And I think a lot of you guys often have done like disc profile. Do you know disc profile? So I've mapped what I call these 4 processing modes onto disc profile, and they fit pretty well. But I've also read the book that was written by William Marston, who invented disc profile. It was written in 1920.
That was 1920.
I see.
And the chapter he wrote on love includes an analysis of how women cause rape.
Oh,
Shut up.
oh, everybody knows that.
Duh. So there are some outmoded ideas that are driving disc profile. And I think that using our shared tribal history as humans to understand like childhood development and, modern business needs for team success is actually a way simpler and more accurate way to understand how humans see the world, So basically, here's the tribal history part. Here are all the groups, and there's more than just this list. This is a partial list of all the ways that kind of folks in the West over the last 2,000 to 3,000 years have tried to understand it from a personality trait perspective. But I really like to explain it from a perception perspective because neuroscience can open that up to us. And then once we're understanding that perception perspective, we can see that in the different processing modes, we actually see different situations in life as representative of safety, threat, progress, etc. Right? And the team time structure, and then there's also this stuff about how our brains actually synchronize when things are going well. So there's that piece, which is super cool. And the team time structure is actually just one of many ways that we will build ourselves a structure that gets us to a vision where
I loved this part.
a good enough balance of useful information and warm, honorable support helps us build structures that lead to results and achieving things we didn't think we could achieve.
Yeah.
And this graphic here is a graphic that also explains the sales journey 100%. So when we understand the sales journey, when we understand how we create safety for clients, how we tell stories that help clients understand where they're going, how we keep our pipeline fresh, how we keep folks, referring over many years, we understand all of those pieces, and we have systems and structures in place that automate as much as we can of those pieces while still keeping heart and love the centerpiece of it all, we become pretty darn effective.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I'm just using what's real about human tribey stuff. And it helps that I'm a woman, so I didn't take too seriously all the stuff that got like gendered weirdly when different men were trying to write about humans and excluding women from, having brains, things like that.
Again, everybody knows women don't have brains.
Right.
I mean, I feel like most of their head, so.
Yeah.
1920, how many women were actually working other than being a secretary or a assistant?
Exactly. So anyway, so I would love to work with you guys here. I'll stop the recording so that we can talk turkey.
Talk turkey.
Yeah. I thought it was so interesting.